And the topic for our Lunch and Learn today is Traversing the Acquisition Gauntlet, SBIR and STTR. I'm going to turn it over to Laurie Moncrieff, who will introduce our speaker and both speakers really, and we'll go from there. So Laurie.
So it's my pleasure to introduce Valerie Muck, who I have the utmost respect for. Valerie and I have worked together for several years. She is a true advocate for small business. While I was at Defense Works, she was always the person I could reach out to, explain the challenges that small business were having. And she was a real champion in trying to alter programs to meet the needs for small businesses. She has 35 years experience with the Air Force, but Valerie's worked in a lot of different places in the Air Force, which to me makes her extremely valuable. And I will tell you that Valerie is that person that after leaving her position and doing a great job, she went back and got further education on SBIRs and STTRs and is forever looking for ways to help small businesses. So anyway, with that, and my pleasure, I will introduce Valerie Muck.
Thanks, Laurie.
Valerie, I'll go ahead and pull the presentation up.
Okay, thank you. So with me today, I have Fraser Kitchell, and he is with KEF Robotics. He's one of the co-founders. And Fraser has been through the SBIR sitter process recently. And he is my first client after I retired. So I figured it was, good to pull him into the conversation. So if any of you, or if he has any comments while we're going through this, please pipe up. And otherwise, I'll have him take a few minutes later in the presentation to talk about his traversing the gauntlet, as I like to call it, because it is quite a gauntlet sometimes. Laurie mentioned that I've had a lot of jobs with the Air Force. It's not because I couldn't hold a job, I think. Most of my career, I was an auditor. I was with the Air Force Audit Agency, and I had the good fortune when I was a GS-15 to cross-train into acquisition and a career broadening assignment, which is what ultimately led me to small business. And it was only during the last 2 years of my career that I even knew we had a small business office with the Air Force. So not enough knowledge internal to the Air Force about what small businesses can do for us. So hopefully working with Laurie, we can educate better the people inside the government on what the capabilities of small businesses are in general, and specifically the technologies that we can get out of the SBIR, STTR process. I also on the line, I know John is out there, and I met him at Tech Warrior. He had a picture earlier he put up of me when I was there checking out the cool demos they had and stuff. And another fun part of having been the director of small business programs for the Air Force was getting to go out across the Air Force and see what we were doing both inside and outside the Air Force with small businesses. So great experience for me, and it ultimately led me to this consulting gig. So you can hit to the next slide. That's me. And I am a veteran as well. I was a pharmacy technician when I was active duty. I served 4 years and got out as a staff sergeant, and am proud to say that I am the recipient of an associate's degree from the Community College of the Air Force in pharmacy technology. So my daughter has her doctorate, and she kind of lauds that over my head. She has her doctorate. I said, yeah, but I've got an associate's degree from the Community College of the Air Force, which you will never get. I can go get a doctorate at any time. She can't get a CCAF degree. So, so talking about SBIR, I just wanted everybody to know the dates that are out there. We are in an open cycle for the program. It closes out on 17 June. The good news is we'll enter another cycle in August. The pre-release date will be 25 August, with it opening up officially on the 3rd of September. The good thing about the process is you cycle through 3 times a year. Also, we have annual broad agency announcements that are open all during the entire year. DARPA has one out there. The Space Development Agency has one out there, and the Army has one out there that goes through the whole year. So when you're looking at these, you see the Air Force has the CSO, which is the Commercial Solutions opening, which is not the traditional SBIRs. That's going through the AFWorks process. And I know you guys have heard about AFWorks and what they're doing. I think it was a couple weeks ago, the Apex folks were in talking about what they're doing for SBIR and STTR and, in general, working with the AFWorks folks. But the Commercial Solutions opening is basically an open call for topics. What cool stuff is your company doing that the Air Force might be interested in? And that's when several of my companies have come in that route. But the more traditional route is the DoD, the Department of Defense, the STTR calls that are open, the 2021.2 and the 2021.B, which is the STTR point. And in there will be specific topics that companies can put forth their solution to answer for the government, be it the Navy, the Army, the Air Force. So that's the more traditional route. There are 469 pages to the broad agency announcement, so be ready to scroll through at your leisure to figure out if you fit into any of the more traditional route of SBIR. And you can go to the next page. Thank you. And I'm going to get a drink.
Oh, good, Val, because I'll chime in here. So
Okay.
yes, the solicitation is massive. It's more important to know what doesn't matter than what does matter. So like a lot of those pages will be topics that you won't be responding to. And then actually, if you're going to write a phase 1, that section is probably only 7 or so pages long. So it is a little bit, if you haven't seen it before, it's hard to get through, but don't be overwhelmed by it.
And there are also direct to phase 2 opportunities out there. So it's not always that you have to go through a phase 1 to get a phase 2 award. So those are also listed in the DoD, SBIR, STTR offerings.
And could I add one more quick thing it kind of builds on the education we've been giving everybody. So AFWorks, when it started, was a PIA that I held and managed, and then it switched to a CSO, which is another form of an agile acquisition contract. I have kind of stayed away educating a lot on the CSO because I understand that, and a CSO, by the way, is managed by GSA on behalf of the Air Force. And I have it on a very good inside information that they are no longer going to do the CSO for FY22. So I haven't spent a lot of time educating on CSOs because I don't know how long term we're going to see much out of CSOs, just as an FYI. So it's same kind of as a PIA, and in a way, it's just managed by GSA, and GSA manages it for the Air Force. So I just, for my people that I've been educating on agile acquisition, I just wanted them to understand that.
So is it that the CSO is going to go away in 2022, or that GSA is going to be managing the Air Force's CSO?
Right now, Air Force is managing that CSO for Air Force. And my understanding is starting FY22, they no longer want to have that CSO with them.
Okay.
So my guess is, if I had to guess, that they will go to another source of an agile acquisition contract. I'll be surprised if they don't go back to a PIA. And they always surprise me, so I could be wrong here. But my understanding is it won't be a CSO moving forward.
Okay. So on this slide, kind of Laurie talked about a little bit, the history of how we came up to these CSOs. we started out in 2019, the Air Force, we did having pitch days where we would have small businesses come into the Air Force and they were down selected to come in. You had to have a technology that was of interest to a program executive officer, a PEO. We've had companies come in. I think the first time was in New York City. We had 60 companies come in and pitch their topics. And right on point, right after their pitch, the Air Force decided whether or not they wanted to award a contract or not. So when you left that room, if you made a right turn out the door, you went down and you got your contract and you got $50,000 in funding through the government credit card. If you turned left, you didn't get an award. We had quite a few awards that day, and it was an awesome process because it was a one-page contract. So the fact that we could whittle down the DoD and the Air Force requirements out of the Federal Acquisition Regulation and then the DoD FAR supplement down to a one-page contract was a monumental effort. And the fact that we could get the funding right then and there via the government purchase card was another monumental effort to get that done. So kind of turned things on its head a little bit for government contracting. The art of the possible happened, and a lot of good things came out of it. One of the things, Dr. Roper is the one who really was helping push this through. And with the change in administration, as a political appointee, he is no longer in that position as the Air Force's Service Acquisition Executive. So once we have a new Service Acquisition Executive for the Air Force, and I didn't look to see if somebody's been nominated yet or not, whether or not that person is going to still be behind the way we're doing the process. And I say we, I still consider myself an Air Force asset, even though I'm merely a consultant. I bleed blue blood for the Air Force. But our priorities change when we have a new administration, right? So we'll have to see how that whole thing plays out. The other thing that changes is your points of contact. So we all know government agencies, people turn over. If you're working in the Department of Defense ecosystem, they turn over more frequently because you're dealing with military folks. So they might change jobs or change locations every 2 to 3 years. If they're forward deployed, they might be there 6 months, they might be there 12 months, but they might be there for several years. So the points of contact change. So you have to be agile and flexible in who you're going to talk to. And Fraser's probably a good person to talk to in that front. Have you had consistently through the 1.5 to 2 years that you've been working the process, have you had the same folks that you've been able to work with in the organizations out there, or do they turn over on you?
Unfortunately, they have turned it over on us a couple of times. The new group we're with, so we had a couple of retirements with a technical point of contact. The Air Force is great about handing off from person to person, and our newest TPOCs are very efficient. So it's been pretty seamless, even though there has been change.
Good. So the other obstacle we have within the government and specifically Department of Defense is on our planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process. There's a long lag time for funding. Right now, the president just released the FY 2022 budget, which goes into effect 1 October if Congress passes it by then. Historically, we've gone under either a government shutdown or continuing resolution authority because in Congress, there's just generally a lack of cooperation on getting our appropriations and our authorizations put through the system fast enough to meet the 1 October deadline. So we're already behind in the fact that the budget is generally due in February and it just came out last week. So we're already behind in the process. Then you have to look at the process in a more holistic look. So we're working the 2022 budget to get that going for 1 October. Well, that's going on. We're also working the 23 budget that we're going to have to put forth to Congress in February of 2022. And along those lines, we're programming in the out years. So if you have a technology coming to fruition and you think it's going to be ready in 2024, you're already late to the game because they're already, marking where that money is going to go for 2024. So you really need to have good transition planning and start, hopefully getting your technology a home in a program of record or a new program of record, because the funding process is long, it's arduous, and it's not very flexible. Hopefully, as people, you know, everybody's cognizant of this. Everybody says it needs to change, and yet it doesn't change. So hopefully as time goes by, it will become less cumbersome. The other thing you have to remember is that you're dealing in a bureaucracy of processes and people. So a lot of times the people have good intentions, but the processes bind them or the law binds them. When we would go over to Congress before I retired, talking about the pitch days and how we were going to have one-page contracts, they were encouraging us, you know, to stretch the limits. You know, don't break the law, but by all means, if we haven't told you you can't do something, stretch the limits and see if you can do it. So we had some really good conversations on the Hill with professional staffers who were very in tune to what we were trying to do to make contracting more agile. Now, if we can just do that with a funding process, we might really hit pay dirt. So, and then the other thing with the process is finding a customer. Where do you even start? Fraser can definitely attest to this. I hope this is where I helped him the most in, you know, who do I go to in the Air Force to even talk to that would be interested in my technology? So Fraser, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to plug Val, but yeah, invaluable. The whole point of the phase one is to find people who actually need your technology within the Air Force, and you only have 90 days. So what we did, and I would recommend you take this approach, you know, find somebody who knows small business and knows the Air Force, and make sure you have a long list of names of people you want to talk to before you even start your phase one, because they're going to be bombarded with lots of other teams who they want their attention, and getting a jump on that was invaluable and did lead to our phase two.
Yeah, and I did not mention that. If you're working under an Air Force CSO, the phase one is specifically designed to do your customer discovery. Who is going to want to go into phase two with you with your technology? So it's a great opportunity to have some time to rifle around out there and find the right customer, but it's also, those 90 days go really fast. So get started before you actually get your phase one award and trying to figure out what are the right offices for you. The other thing you have to remember, especially in the Air Force and the DoD, you have an acquisition arm and you have a requirements arm. So who is your customer? Is your customer on the acquisition side, or are they on the requirements side? The acquisition side is going to buy your product, but the requirements side is the one that's going to really push for the technologies that you can deliver to get them out in the field, either to the maintainers, the warfighters, anybody out there, the medical troops, that kind of stuff. So, okay, next slide. So finding a customer. You know, first question, do you even know who your customer is? Where do you start? We talked about that a little bit. I was in the federal government for 35 years, and I still have problems trying to figure out who's doing what to whom. And, you know, it was this way 6 months ago, and it's different now. And I find that the further I get away from my retirement date, I know less people for reach back to figure things out. I still have some of my points of contact in there, and I covet them and you know, reach back when the other thing, do you understand your customers' requirements? Now, you guys in Kansas, you have, I think, 3 military installations in Kansas. So I know McConnell from an Air Force perspective, and I know you've got a couple of Army installations in Leavenworth and Riley. But at McConnell, there should be a small business professional there, or somebody within the Air Force who has responsibility for McConnell and the folks around there. You know, reach out to those types of people, the small business professionals, your small business development center. You guys have a great program in Kansas. Your PTACs, the professional technical assistance centers, reach out to them. The PIAs are a great resource. And Laurie talked about Defense Works being a PIA. You've got Montana State University has a couple for manufacturing. the Apex folks who were in a couple weeks ago and talked, their PIA, they have such great information, and I think they're really undervalued right now. I don't think enough small businesses know that they're out there, that they can reach out to those folks. One of the companies I work with, I met at Griffiths Institute up in Rome, New York. They were doing a competition up there, and the company actually won. That was when I was still working for the Air Force. And that person reached out to me then after I retired. And I hooked up with them as a company that's now, I help them out as well. And I sit on their board. It's United Aircraft Technologies. But there's so many networking opportunities, and that's where you really get to know your customer. I can't tell you enough about taking advantage of those networking opportunities. And I know it's been tough with COVID, a lot of virtual stuff. So you don't have those hallway discussions or those after the conference bar room discussions that always probably are the most effective networking that you can get. But I think virtual has also opened up some opportunities for folks in that small businesses don't always have a lot of capital to go participate in some of the events that are taking place. So events that normally might not have been within their reach, they can now do it virtually, sometimes for free. So there's no capital investment, definitely no need to travel, and you don't have a hotel room to, pay for. So there's some benefits in, the virtual side as well. I'm excited about things starting to open back up. I think John mentioned that they have something going on in October for the tech enterprise process. But great opportunity to get out there and demo your product. One thing I tell people too, make sure you have your 1-minute elevator speech ready. If you just happen to run into somebody, be ready to talk to them about your product or service for, a clip. You're not going to keep them forever. You get a 1-minute clip to kind of fill them in on your product and service. And then also have kind of that 5-minute summary back in your back pocket. If they're really interested in your 1-minute clip, it's like, well, let me tell you more. So here's 5 minutes more that we can tell you about. And then you have to have that full presentation ready to go. I say, yeah, you got a great product. I want you to brief my boss. So make sure you have your, PowerPoint Ranger badge ready to go and brief the boss, a 30-minute discussion on the attributes of your product or service and why you make something better than your competition, and they'd want to go with you versus somebody else. Let's see, did I cover everything I wanted to from that slide? Any questions on there? Fraser, you have anything to add from finding your customer?
No, if it's not obvious, you have to be determined and be prepared to hear no a lot. And yeah, just try to get more names out of every single person you meet.
Yeah, that's a great point. You might not be talking to the right person, but that person might know the right person. So use that as, kind of peeling back the onion, so to speak, and finding out where you need to go. Okay, next slide. So phase 3 on SBIR and STTR is the Holy Grail. That is program office money at that point. That's not money that's coming from the SBIR, STTR pot of money that is set aside every year. And that pot of money for phase 1 and phase 2 is a percentage of the R&D budget for the organization. So they take out, X million dollars every year just to do phase 1 and phase 2s. But then you have to go to phase 3. And unfortunately, many of our phase 2s just fall into the valley of death. They never move on to a phase 3. They don't get the funding. I wish there were some better statistics out there to really understand how many phase 1s go to phase 2, how many phase 2s go to phase 3, so that we could really show the benefit of that. And I know the Air Force has tried to capture that information in the past. I think there's some notional information in there. I just don't know that we're catching all of it. I did go out to the Federal Procurement Data System Next Generation, FPDSNG, and pull some data, just doing a search for phase 3 awards. And so the words phase 3 have to be in the title or the summary somewhere. And I did get quite a few that I pulled, but my concern is that the title of the contract or the description of the contract doesn't specifically call out phase 3. So there's probably more out there than we're aware of. They just aren't titled as phase 3. As I mentioned before, make sure you have a transition plan early in the process, early in your life cycle, so that when it's time to get funded, you're prepared and the organization that you're working with is prepared to put you into their budget. And don't rely too heavily on government funding. Make sure you're looking at your commercial sector. One of the things coming out of AFWorks, they really want to leverage commercial technologies. So they want you to be finding a commercial customer. It's not just selling to the government. What out there commercially can we leverage to bring that technology to the next level? Also, you don't have to be limited by the government agency that you contract with for your phase 1 or phase 2. You can get your phase 3 technology. If it was with the Army, you can have the Navy go on contract as a phase 3, and they don't have to compete it because it's already been competed back in the phase 1. So one of the benefits of the SBIR, STTR process is once you've got a phase 1, you don't have to go through a competition down select for phase 2 and phase 3. It can just be a direct award. Be flexible, but don't spread yourself too thin. You might be talking to 5 different potential customers and all of them want something a little different. Don't get spun up by that. You need to stay a little bit focused so that you don't try to do too many things at one time. The company that I'm the board member on, came to us as a board to say, okay, we can do these 2 things really well. Now they want us to do these 3 other things. So we had to make a decision. Was that good for the company? What's your strategic plan? Do you want to really go down that route, or is that something you just kind of want to cut bait on and stick to what your plan was originally, or pivot a little bit if you need to? So, okay. Next slide. Places to go for assistance. I think I ran through some of these already as I talked. One of the things, professional organizations, I talk about the National Defense Industrial Association, NDIA, the Air Force Association. These kinds of organizations have events throughout the year that you can go to. The other thing is consortiums. And I don't know, Laurie, if you guys have talked about consortiums in the past. Some pluses and minuses on those. A lot of them you have to buy into. So there's some concern from small businesses about having to pay to get into a consortium. I think there's some out there that you don't have to pay. One of the big ones that I'm familiar with from when I was the director of small business programs, the Space Enterprise Consortium stood up when I was still in my position, and that was getting some good traction. Although I don't know that there were enough small businesses that were really getting pulled through that pipeline. So, definitely,
Valerie,
I think, go ahead.
The 2 consortiums that I would recommend are Cornerstone, which is free, and then go to the OTA consortium through ERDIC, again, which is free. The Space Consortium has not gotten a lot of traction.
Yeah.
I've been on some conference calls with them fairly recently. They're kind of stumbling a little bit. So anyway, those are the 2 main ones. Apex, I would totally sign up for Apex is the other one that I would recommend highly. Yeah,
Apex, I sat through one of their lessons probably 6 weeks ago. I thought it was fabulous. And then they briefed the Kansas SBDC a couple weeks ago. And I like what they're doing. And I think you can get a lot of traction as a small business in that area. I think there's a lot of help to be had, especially mentoring through the program. And other mentoring opportunities are consultants familiar with the landscape. And that's what I do. And, hopefully, Fraser, you can say I did that for you. And then peers, reach out to your peers in the same space that you're in. Sometimes peers are competitors. Sometimes they're not necessarily competitors, but they might help augment what you're doing if you team up and can do something together. There's also the SBA has the Mentor Protege program that's more formal. And beyond that, there's also the DoD has a Mentor Protege program as well, but that's subject to annual authorizations and appropriations. And we had a gap year where we didn't get our appropriations a couple years ago. So I don't know if they've gained some traction back with that or not. I also put on the slide, there's a link there to the Air Force Technology Transfer and Transition Office that you can get. There's a whole litany of the intermediaries listed out there. You know, the Doolittle, the Griffiths, the Apex, that stuff's all listed out there. Catalyst Campus, I think we have somebody from there today. I actually, you know, went out there when it was pretty new, probably in 2018, or it was new to me anyway, and I got to sit in on one of their presentations and spend a day there. It was an awesome experience. So, anybody have anything else on that for assistance?
I would tell you that Catalyst Campus is expanding to different locations, and I think that's another great resource to reach out to.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. I mean, in Colorado Springs, we have a huge presence for Catalyst Campus, but we have now moved out to Maryland. We will be moving out into the Utah area, and I believe there's like 6 other locations that will be coming online. So I think that offers a great benefit, you know, just as far as access across the country.
Thank you. I didn't know they were expanding to that degree. That's wonderful. So if you go to the next slide, this is something that's been near and dear to my heart since before I retired, because cybersecurity had become such an issue for the services. And now you can see from a commercial sector with the recent Colonial Pipeline, I think EDS, the meat manufacturers, we have some stuff with our mass transit that's been breached lately, ransomware issues going on. So I've been worried about cybersecurity for many years. Plus, just as a senior leader in the Air Force, I took a lot of briefings that, you know, it'd curl your hair what some of the things they were telling us. So really important to pay attention to what's going on with the cybersecurity requirements. A lot of people are getting spun up about the cybersecurity maturity model certification. I tell companies to hold up, settle down, focus on NIST compliance. And if you have a contract with the Department of Defense, you probably already have the DFARS requirement 252.204-7012. I know Fraser does, about safeguarding covered defense information and cyber incident reporting. So along with that, it says you have to comply with NIST Special Publications 800-171. So if you get any new contracts with the Department of Defense, the 7019, or actually 7020 is going to be in your contract, where it says you have DoD basic assessment requirements that you have to have in place before you even get a contract. So you have to go through the basic NIST assessment, score yourself, and then load your information into the supplier performance risk system. So those folks that are getting spun up about CMMC, if you get your NIST taken care of and you have your cybersecurity plan and you have a plan of action and milestone, a POAM, if you have gaps where you don't meet the requirements of NIST, but you have a plan on how you're going to get there, right now you can get away with that. Once the cybersecurity maturity model comes on board, you're not going to be able to have a POAM. Everything has to be done already. So take the time now to get yourself cyber compliant with NIST Special Publications 800-171. And I put a couple of links out there. If you haven't been out there, the accreditation body has a website, as does the acquisition and sustainment folks within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense. One of the things that they're doing with cybersecurity and CMMC, they are setting up the third-party certifiers, and those have not been approved yet. They've not gone, that far in the process. And they're also establishing registered practitioners. I am a registered practitioner. I went in and took the class that CMMC requires you to take. I signed the ethics regulation, and I had to go get a background check or something. I figured my background was pretty good as I held a TS clearance before I left the Air Force, but so no skeletons came out of my closet. But I am a registered practitioner for CMMC. I'm not technical. I'm more on the business acumen side, and I can help find, people find the technical side to get support with. And I understand where this is going and why it's going there. So if you need any help on that, let me know. But there's a lot of information out there. You're going to be inundated with it. If you haven't been, I don't know why. Maybe they haven't found you yet, but when they do, prepare to be inundated. Yeah,
I'll chime in here, Val. So Val's been getting on my company, KEF, about getting our compliance here. And I definitely, really enjoy being a small business and moving quickly and don't like any sort of overhead like this, but we've come to see it as an advantage. There's a stat that somebody relayed to me recently that when these become law, or when they're fully introduced, something like 40% of the small business base is going to not be able to do contracts. So if you can get this early, you could absolutely have a better chance of winning contracts or sweep up things that have to be given to different folks who are compliant. So it's not an easy lift. There's 3 of us at our company who work on this, and we meet once a week, and we're trying to be compliant by the end of June. But we do think it's worth it, having studied it and heard about it.
Fraser, just a quick question on that. I mean, do you find it overly expensive to be able to do the compliance?
Well, Shay, so far, no. We've made a list of things we have to acquire to become compliant, and it's on the order of, a lock for our server. So we have an on-site server. We do use tools like Google Suite and some other, we have our own Wi-Fi that we have to have people log into. So there's a few things there that are modest expense. You can certainly pay people to help you with this, but we're trying to do it internally because we just want to understand it ourselves. So no, we haven't expended any money so far, just time.
Okay. That's good to know, because I've heard from a few of the small businesses that have come through the accelerator program that it's expensive. Now, whether they mean expensive as in time or they mean expensive as in materials, I'm not sure. So I would just wanted to kind of get your point of view from a small business.
Well, we're only going for level 1, and there's 5 levels, and it certainly will get more expensive and more onerous later on, but it hasn't been a hurdle yet.
Great, thanks.
And a lot of the expense is predicated on the or on the type of facility you are. For instance, the manufacturing facilities are running into great expense. It could be a ROM in the order of $150,000 to $250,000 to get CMMC certified. General Holt, who is over all contracts for the United States Air Force, really wants to try to help to come up with a solution to develop a way for small businesses to buy a licensing agreement with somebody to help in that regard, where basically they offer a package to all these small businesses. And then if you are subscribed and work with that one entity, you pay like a monthly fee. He wants it to be reasonable. And then when you're on an Air Force contract, you merely check the box and say that you have have a contract with that company. So I think they're going to start looking for solutions. The Air Force is very aware that it's an arduous process. And I'm happy to say that General Holt, I had met with him previously, and he made it clear to me he's going to stay in his position. And so far, I don't know, Valerie, if you heard any different, he is transitioning over. And I'll share that Frank Kendall is the new Assistant Secretary of Air Force. And Valerie and I know Frank, he's from way back which is a good thing. He's been around a long time, and he's been supportive of Will Roper and everything that was going on previously. So I don't see a lack of support. Right now, Darlene Costello is the acting Assistant Secretary of Acquisition, and she came from the Will Roper team as well. So I don't know how you feel, Valerie, but I think that the teams in there now is very cognizant of the need to put something in place to help small businesses, both with CMMC, but also very, very committed to continuing down this path of finding ways to help small business, and wants feedback on all of this. I shared yesterday on the Oklahoma session that for FY22, we're going to see a 5% decline in sustainment and acquisition contracts. However, they're sliding 5.7 over for R&E, innovation and tech. And I think that bodes very well for small businesses and is a really good way to be positioned as a small business. So anyway, I'll go back on mute, but.
No, appreciate the comments. Another thing I read, I think it was yesterday, that President Biden wants to increase the government contracts that go to small disadvantaged businesses. I think basically double it from right now, the goal is 5%. I think he wants to double it to 10%, which could drive an increase in the number of companies that are 8A, small business, disadvantaged small businesses. Or it will at least make getting contracts easier for those small businesses. One of the things that came out of the previous administration, I should say two things really, you have your best-in-class vehicles, contract vehicles that are out there, which a lot of small businesses were kind of shut out of those because those best-in-class vehicles are IDIQ contracts that might have, 10 or 20 contractors on them, and those become the vehicles of choice for companies. The other thing that you have that came out of the last administration that really took a bite, and that noise you hear is my dog shaking if you hear anything come across the line. The category management took a bite out of small businesses as well. So, I mentioned different things change with different administrations. So with the Biden administration, I know that the announcement about the 8A program was good news, and that we can get more dollars and more contracts into the hands of small businesses. So we'll just, kind of see how it works through the system. I think I have one more slide, which is the, get off the stage slide, which has my contact information on it. It also has Fraser's contact information. Fraser, I know I've kind of pinged you throughout. Is there anything else you want to talk about from your company's perspective? Take a few minutes and explain what you do and why you're doing it.
Yeah, so I was thinking, just starting at the beginning too, of why we chose to do SBIRs, because there's other ways to get money as a small business, and of course you have to weigh all of those. What we like as a software development company who's really just started out, we are seeking non-dilutive capital, so the government's a great partner there. We've also, SBIRs can provide that. The downsides of them is that this process to get in is a little bit onerous. You do have to spend time writing good proposals. You do have to wait quite a while. You don't have, the odds of winning are low. So you have to really decide for yourself of whether you have a winning technical idea. And then our general rule at KEF, and so before we started our own company, we were writing NASA SBIRs, and the rule is if you don't know who you're writing to, you can't really write a SBIR. So make sure you're talking to people. Don't write and then expect to get feedback and expect to win. You've really got to put in traction. You got to put in effort before you begin to write. Other than that, yeah, I think we have yet to see whether you can build a real business with SBIRs, but we certainly seem like we're off to a promising start. And I certainly like working with the government more than I like working with investors. I really feel like now that we're developing capabilities that are helpful to people, they almost become part of our company and help us, you know, work on solutions that are real. They give us real problems, and, you know, ask us if we can solve them. And then there's, you know, we've been able to expand some of our phase twos. So yeah, overall, I'm really impressed with how the, in particular, AFWorks is, how responsive they are, how fast they're moving. And I recommend it to lots of other companies. So Val asked me to be here, and I'm happy to do so because I've had a good experience with her, but I also, I mean, do feel free to reach out. I like helping other companies figure out the process, because I think it's a bunch of baloney and a few key things to know. And if you know them, you're going to be on the inside track to getting what's maybe your first dollars. So I'll end there.
Okay, any questions or anybody want to talk about anything else?
Well, and this is Rick Slater. I do have one question going back to phase threes. And as I understand, of course, with a phase three, you can get a direct award. But at the same time, you can get a direct award, as I understand it, and it doesn't have to focus on what your phase three was. And for example, if I've got a data analysis phase three, and I can go after an IT security contract because a huge portion of the work is data analysis. So I could actually go after an IT security contract, and it still could be a direct award, as I understand it. And has there been any outreach to, you know, to educate folks that that's one way they can actually market their phase threes?
And Bill Robinson is on. Bill, can you unmute and share? FTI is a great company out of Ohio, and they specialize in helping small businesses move to phase threes. And this might be a good place for you to chime in, Bill, if you would.
Sure, glad to. Just a slight correction. We don't typically help other SBIR companies get to phase threes. We are a phase three company. We use the SBIR technologies we built through that program over the last 35 years. And we just happen to be very fortunate that the technologies we built were more in line with data analytics. And as Rick kind of alluded to, data analytics touches all different aspects. So we use our SBIR technologies today to help financial management people, engineering people, software development, cybersecurity, and so many different areas because they're using our tools to be able to solve some of those mission needs. And so we've been very fortunate over the years to be able to expand and kind of what we like to call weaponize SBIR phase three contracting and really help the government solve a lot of their problems. And we work with a lot of teammates, especially nowadays where, like in the world of cyber, where the need moves so fast and there's so many different technologies. A SBIR phase three is a very flexible contract vehicle to be able to bring in teaming partners of all nature without having to get bogged down in creating a PWS that is all the deliverables are clearly defined for the next 5 years, right? SBIR phase three doesn't require that. And so when you have a SBIR phase three, you'll learn a lot of lessons that it's not your typical government contracting. A lot of those handcuffs you have on the competitive side, as long as you're using the SBIR technologies somewhere within that scope of work, and that's what we do. We put brains in seats to help our government customers use our technology and to help them with their mission set. So it's a good partnership.
So Bill, maybe you could put your contact information on your chat. We've featured Front FTI a couple of times, but for those of you who are online that have not participated in those sessions, Bill, if you could make your information available, that'd be great.
And I just wanted to chime in on Rick's question too. So as a former smarmy government auditor, if the scope of work on the phase 3 didn't align with the scope of work in the phase 2, and have some level of overlap, then I, as a smarmy government auditor, would probably call that into question as a viable direct award.
Yeah,
So
positivity.
I'd be careful.
Yeah, you take that, say, for example, you did have a cybersecurity product. That was your SBIR technology. That's your intellectual property. You've been awarded a phase 1, maybe even a phase 2 with that. Can you use that SBIR technology to do hospital administration for Walter Reed Army? Probably not, right? It doesn't go with the scope of work. But could you use that technology to do information technology support? Yes, as long as you're also doing cybersecurity and putting that technology to use somewhere on there. Anything that touches. But she's absolutely right. You want to definitely be careful. If you're making a space part for a radar system, don't expect to do a cybersecurity contract with it.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding equipment. We just concluded phase 1 and submitted our phase 2 proposal. But the way I understand DFAR and FAR regulations, if you purchase equipment with SBIR funding, the government owns it. Is there a way to bypass that in terms of equipment, whether that's for testing, i.e. a load cell, or an industrial 3D printer?
Man, that's a good
So-
Valerie question. I can't answer that.
And I can't either, but I can get back to you on that. So the question is, if I procure equipment with phase 1 funding and it's entirely in phase 1 funding, or is some of the funding yours?
No, I'm more aligning with phase 2 funding, or I didn't know if it encompassed SBIR dollars from 1 to 3, that when you purchase equipment, the government owns it. The likelihood.
I don't think so. I think that's yours.
That doesn't,
I-
yeah,
I
it
agree.
doesn't sound right to me that it
Yeah.
would belong to the government.
I've only been a part of one SBIR where the government took anything back, and that was because about a third of the entire 750K was spent to develop this big crane system that then they ran some tests on. So 5 years later, NASA came back to the company I was working for and said, "Hey, we want that crane." But that is really, really rare. Usually it's yours to keep, especially if it's smaller dollars.
Do you agree, Bill? I can't imagine them taking it back.
No, the SBIR dollars are given to that company for that concept that you described on a bar napkin, so to speak, right? That's phase 1. You've got the concept and they gave you a little bit of money. And if they really, really like it and they want to see a prototype, they're giving you some funds to do that. And that is for you, because you can't honestly say how all of that equipment was funded by the government or how much the total bill was. So you own it all when it comes to that. Now, when it comes to phase 3, that's a different story. That's the government organizational operational funds funding that. And you can actually buy products and services on the same phase 3 contract. You don't have those limitations. And that equipment belongs to the government. The only thing you own is the intellectual property of that SBIR award.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had is our phase 2 it's a product that benefits canine handlers. So military working dogs will be part of our testing and T&E framework. There are certain documentation in regards to animal testing, but the way I understand animal testing, that's like a lab rat versus a military working dog, or are they one and the same?
I would think that any animal testing at all has to go through, they're very specific in the SBIR broad agency announcement on the things that you have to do for animal testing. And I think that would apply to a lab rat or a military working dog. And they also have in the broad agency announcement, they talk about if anything has to be done on a human, the rules that you have to go through on human testing. So, you know, refer to your broad agency announcement that you're going under and make sure you're complying with all of that.
Is John Matecki still on? I was just curious because he would be one that may be able to provide some insight. I don't see him still on. Okay. Because I know at SoftWorks, we developed oxygen masks for dogs. But I think what we did was give those for testing to SOCOM, who then took them. So it wasn't the small businesses doing the testing on the animals. And that's the way we went around it.
Okay. And that's a similar scenario. It's like we're developing essentially a slow retracting dog leash compared to an off-the-shelf leash you'd find at PetSmart. And we don't have the dog. We're going to give the end user and our TPOC the leash to test with their dogs. We might be there watching.
Well, so you know, I know a bunch of 7th Special Forces guys down by Eglin. I actually bike with them, and they have, it's the dog group. So if I can help with that, let me know, because I could call those guys. I could just tell them either do it or I'm going to beat you on the next bike ride.
Okay, yeah, that's great. But since I'm giving them the leash to do the testing and I don't have the dog, maybe I don't fall into that category, much like your oxygen masks.
I would guess that would be the way around it. If I connected you with some of my Special Forces buddies that I mean, they're dog handlers, that's who they are in Special Forces, and they wanted to try those for their dogs. Do you agree, Valerie? If those guys wanted to take them on their own and just, because they take those dogs, some of them, they take them home at night.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I would look at, one, your contract, what it says in your contract, and 2, look back at the BAA, the broad agency announcement that your SBIR or sitter came out from under, and see what it specifically says. But hey, if Laurie's got a way around it, and it's not illegal, I'm all for it.
Well, again, these guys, a lot of these guys have their current dogs, which are their 7 Special Forces dogs. A lot have who stay on base during the day. They don't take them home, but a lot of them end up keeping their old Special Forces dogs as their dogs, if you will. And I know a bunch of them. Duke, man, he hangs out with us all the time. And I bet those guys would be willing to give you some feedback. I'm just saying they're a good group of guys. And I just know them personally. So I think they might be a good resource for you. It's you know, and they could maybe tell you what to do from there.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Are you Kansas or Oklahoma?
Colorado.
Oh, Colorado. Okay. Well, I work with Catalyst Campus out of Colorado too. So just let me know. I'll give you my email address in the chat.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah. Fortunate enough to be included in this conference. So thank you.
No problem.
And then also we're submitting a phase 1 for a blast-proof, fireproof soft cooler that was actually developed by Army Natick based on an Army requirement. But in our previous phase 1 wins, we already had an end user, an engaged stakeholder that we were able to provide just a letter of support, not an MOU from them. Now working on a phase 1 with no Air Force stakeholder, and it's the SBIR AFWorks open topic, which requires an Air Force stakeholder. Would it make sense to exhaust effort and energy in that proposal if we don't already have, I mean, we have Air Force customers in mind, we just don't have them engaged on the cooler yet. So is it still worth submitting a phase 1 without having any documentation from them saying, yeah, we're interested in this?
Yeah, that's what the phase 1 process is for, is to do the actual reach out to those customers. I would have a list of potentials before I submit my phase 1, but the actual grunt work, boots on the ground, is going to be during that phase 1 to find your customer in the Air Force. So yeah, if you're confident in your technology, I'd still go for it. And if you're confident that it's something the Air Force could use.
Agree with Val, everything she said. That's you're ahead of where we were when we went into phase 1.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I've been defeated, submitting phase 1s with Air Force signatories saying, yeah, we want this, and then getting denied. So not having any engaged stakeholder at the onset of the proposal is like, you know, is it worth the energy or effort? But in talking with everyone on here, it seems like, yeah, what do you have to lose, really?
Well, and between Valerie and myself and Tim, I think Tim's off now.
No, I'm
Oh,
on.
there you are. You moved on my screen.
I am live.
There are a lot of folks. I mean, if it's a blast proof, kind of fireproof, I mean, ERDIC does a ton of actually building fireproof, blast proof things for AFRL, Munitions Directorate, RW. If you came up with, here's my product, and you just had like a nice quad chart, I'd be willing to bet that one of us could look at that and say, here's who I'd talk to.
Okay, sounds good. Thank
Fair
you.
statement, Tim. Valerie, I don't want to.
Yeah, David, I'd say also, I mean, if you work this ahead of the time, like Fraser says, and you get a TPOC on the other side, it's like lobbing the football, building your case. You got yourself your MOU, you got an Air Force TPOC who wants you, you got a special operations unit that is demanding for it. You got that ahead of time, then as you got that phase 1, you're way ahead of the ball game. But getting somebody in the field to say, I want it now, and they will be the technical point of contact is huge. And I leverage also the commercial side. If you have a well-built commercial side, that's very, very powerful, because they want you to be successful. They want to see that you have another line of operation that'll keep you financially stable, so you won't go into the death spiral. So just a couple words of advice there. And this group here, everyone's got our contacts and are where we live, and we're here to help you out.
Okay.
Well, and John Matecki would be another one, guys. Valerie,
Yep.
Tim, I would sign up for his demo. You're going to really get it in front of people then, and you're going to have a live demo to say, hey, I saw this demo. You're going to get those guys excited. So check out Tech Warrior.
Yeah, I participated in the live one in 2019, which subsequently is how I won the phase 1. Someone from there, I think he does the ICU 360 camera, mentioned it to a gentleman at Altus Air Force Base, Oklahoma. I had a clamping solution for aircraft. He reached out to me and said, we need this clamp to secure iPads in the back of C-17s. Can you write a phase 1? I said, yeah, can you write an MOU? They said, yes. Won the phase 1, let them know. He said, oh, sorry, we already found a solution for that. And I said, okay, we'll find another problem for us to solve. They came up with a slow retracting dog leash, which all the canine handlers have been trying to reinvent for the military working dog for decades. And so who would have guessed I'm working on a dog leash now?
That's another focus area for SOCOM. And Tim and I are smiling because we're in Barbara, because we're working with Tom Yoakum regularly and often. So
yeah. So it's because of him mentioning my clamp that I end up getting a phase 1 and now a strong proposal for phase 2.
awesome.
That's great. Good collaboration.
Absolutely.
That's what it's all about.
All right.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Thank you so much, Valerie. I
Thanks for having me.
think the world of you, you know that, and
Thank you.
really glad to get you engaged with the group.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for the
everyone for
quality.
joining.
Thank you for the high quality information. It was really great.
Thanks a lot. This is really good.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody. Happy Friday to all. Valerie, thank you. Vicki, you're outstanding as always. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Tim,
Bye
see
now.
you soon. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.